Hello and welcome back to World 360. Who could be Kamala Harris's running mate ahead of the US elections? Why is Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to the US this week significant? And what does Ukraine's foreign minister seek to achieve by visiting China this week? We answer this and more in today's episode. So first up, Kamala Harris. The American vice president has been dominating headlines as her party's preferred candidate now that Joe Biden has dropped out of the presidential race. Harris currently has enough support, including from Nancy Pelosi, to clinch the Democratic nomination. Now, Republicans have already confirmed Trump as their nominee at the recent convention, but the Democratic National Convention will only be held on August 19th. That's a while away. And it's at this convention that the party will officially pick its nominee. Now, the thinking behind this is important. Kamala Harris doesn't have the type of pan-American support that Biden does, but picking her makes sense given there's not a lot of time to campaign and introduce someone new. She's been in the public eye for 4 years now as vice president. Even if Kamala Harris doesn't win the presidency, perhaps the thinking in the Democratic Party was that if Biden were to continue and lose, it may impact the Democratic Party's showing in the House of Representatives and the Senate elections, thereby leaving no checks and balances on Trump. Keep in mind, the elections for these two houses in the US Congress will take place in November as well, side by side to the presidential polls. Keep in mind, with the Senate, only 1/3 of seats will go to polls. But now that Kamala Harris seems to be the party's front runner, the big question is, who will be her running mate? We know that Trump has picked J.D. Vance, a freshman senator from Ohio and a friend of Trump's son. But perhaps it's likely that Kamala Harris will be joined on the ticket by a white male. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro has a good shot. Shapiro has previously served as a Democrat lawmaker in the House of Representatives from 2004 to 2012. A look at betting markets puts Shapiro at 7-4 odds as Harris's running mate compared to North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper and Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, who are also considered top picks for the post. But there are also some outliers like Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, who presents an advantage because he comes from a battleground state. As you know, in the US, battleground states or swing states can decide an election. And in this election, the battleground states expected to decide the election are Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and North Carolina. Even before the assassination on Trump, he seemed to be leading in polls against Biden. In fact, the non-partisan Cook Political Report came out with a report just days before the Trump shooting, in which it moved 3 key swing states of Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada from an undecided category to a lean Republican, which spells bad news for the Democrats. New polls this week have indicated winds of change, however. Before, Trump had a national lead over Biden, but now Kamala Harris leads a 2 percentage point lead over Trump, as per a Reuters Ipsos poll. That said, a national lead is only an indication of a popular vote, and as we know in the US, the election is decided by swing states and the undecideds. And therefore, whoever joins Kamala Harris on the ticket will have to balance out perceptions of the Democratic Party among the undecideds, especially in the swing states. For our second topic, we're looking at Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the US this week, which comes amid a fraught time of US-Israel relations. Netanyahu is also expected to address the US Congress and further his cause with regard to the Israel war in Gaza. However, relations between Israel and the US, as I mentioned, are fraught. There are a lot of frictions. Biden and Netanyahu have not always seen eye to eye amid this war, and a few months prior, the US sanctioned some Israeli settlers in the West Bank, much to Israel's ire. More so, there are reports that Kamala Harris will skip Netanyahu's address to the US Congress, which Israeli officials have termed disappointing. There are other voices in the far left of the Democratic Party who have denounced Netanyahu ahead of this visit, like Bernie Sanders, who called him a war criminal. As a report in the New York Times points out, Netanyahu faces a US Congress that is deeply divided over his leadership during the Gaza war, and tensions are so high that Speaker Mike Johnson has threatened to have anyone who causes a disturbance on the floor during his speech arrested. And therefore, Netanyahu's main purpose by visiting the US seems to be to gather up bipartisan support for Israel. Already, the US has shelled out $17 billion in additional military aid to Israel, which had faced its first direct attack from Iran in April this year. For our last topic, we move to China, which has a special visitor this week. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has traveled to Beijing and made some positive remarks about the Chinese government's efforts to promote peace in the conflict. According to a press release on China-Ukraine foreign ministers' talks, Kuleba said that the Ukrainian side values China's opinions and its efforts on a political resolution for the Ukraine conflict. This would certainly help China's desire to position itself as a mediator on the world stage. We already saw how China helped restore ties between regional foes Saudi Arabia and Iran. It was also this week that various Palestinian factions, including rivals Fatah and Hamas, signed a unity deal in Beijing. This deal was called the Beijing Declaration on Ending Division and Strengthening Palestinian National Unity, and it went through after 3 days of talks in the Chinese capital. This deal seeks to set up a temporary national reconciliation government to rule the Gaza Strip after the war. It's a critical document that saw, as I mentioned, two major rivals, Fatah and Hamas, come together. And therefore, the Ukraine foreign minister's visit to Beijing holds that much more importance. Perhaps it's also a way for the Ukrainian side to show that it is actively seeking common ground with China in its effort to end the war, given Russia has consistently accused Kiev of not being forthcoming on the negotiating table. It's also worth noting that Kuleba has traveled all the way to Beijing, even though China did not participate in a key peace conference in Switzerland recently, and this conference, which took place last month, did not include Russia. Reports also indicate that the Ukrainian foreign minister will lobby Chinese officials to attend another peace conference that is planned sometime this year, potentially in November. But let's not forget that it was only a couple of years ago that Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin pledged a no-limits partnership between their two countries. And due to geopolitical shifts on the world stage, Russia and China have only been coming closer to one another. Beijing would certainly score a diplomatic win if its 6-point peace plan that it came up with alongside Brazil ends up playing a critical role in ending the war in Ukraine. Thanks for watching. This is Pia Krishnankutty for ThePrint.